Everything is Fucked, a book about hope, by Mark Manson. Picture this, the heart of World War II, inside the repurposed warehouses of a former military barracks. Here, something unimaginably dark took root. A place that would become synonymous with concentrated evil. A place called Auschwitz. Over 4 brutal years, more than 1.3 million souls were systematically tortured and murdered in an area barely larger than Central Park. And for the longest time, the world just watched. No one lifted a finger to stop it, except for one extraordinary man. His name was Witold Pilecki, and honestly, his story reads like something out of a superhero comic. Imagine a hero willingly walking straight into hell's flaming jaws to face down pure evil. The odds? Impossible. The mission? Basically a suicide note with extra steps. Yet this man never even blinked. Pilecki was already a decorated war hero when he made the most insane decision of his life. In 1940, rumors started circulating through the Polish underground resistance about a massive new German prison complex. Thousands of Polish citizens were vanishing into thin air, and the Allies had absolutely no clue what was happening behind those walls. So Pilecki did something completely bonkers. He volunteered to get himself arrested by the SS, shipped off to Auschwitz, and then, from the inside, organize a full-blown mutiny and prison break. His commanders probably thought he'd lost his mind, but he did it anyway. What he found inside made the rumors seem tame. Prisoners were executed for the smallest fidget. Men were literally worked to death doing completely pointless tasks. And yet, somehow, this absolute legend managed to build an entire resistance network within the camp. He created an intelligence operation, smuggling messages out in laundry baskets. He even cobbled together a transistor radio from scraps to transmit escape plans to the outside world. He saved countless lives, striking a tiny match of hope in humanity's darkest corner. He begged the Allies to liberate the camp, or at least bomb the gas chambers. But his reports were so horrific that people couldn't wrap their heads around them. Nobody wanted to believe things could possibly be that bad. His prison break plans never materialized. But here's the twist. This isn't actually a story about hope. According to the author we're diving into today, this is a story about why everything is completely and utterly, well, you know the word. Welcome to the Billionaire's Bookshelf. Today, we're exploring Everything is Fucked, a book about hope, the thought-provoking and slightly irreverent follow-up to Mark Manson's global sensation, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, a book that sold millions of copies and fundamentally shifted how an entire generation thinks about living a meaningful life. If The Subtle Art taught us what to care about, this book tackles an even deeper puzzle. In a world that's objectively better than it's ever been by almost every measurable standard, why does it feel like everyone's losing their grip on reality? Why is this weird sense of hopelessness spreading like wildfire across the wealthiest, safest countries on the planet? Mark Manson takes us on a wild ride through philosophy, psychology, and some seriously uncomfortable corners of human history to crack this mystery. By the time we're done here, you'll understand the bizarre paradox defining our modern age. You'll discover that the very thing we chase to make our lives better, hope itself, might actually be the source of all our problems. And you'll learn about a completely different path forward, a way to live with genuine strength, honor, and grace in a world that will always be, in some fundamental way, broken. It's a bold promise, I know, but trust me, it's a journey absolutely worth taking. So let's dive in. To make sense of our strange modern crisis, we need to start with what Manson calls the uncomfortable truth. Imagine ordering your morning coffee, and instead of scribbling your name on the cup, the barista writes this: "One day, you and everyone you love will die. And beyond a small circle of people for an extremely brief period of time, almost nothing you say or do will ever really matter." This is the uncomfortable truth of life, and everything you think or do is basically an elaborate dance to avoid facing it. We're inconsequential cosmic dust, bumping around on a tiny blue marble in space. We make up our own importance, we invent our purpose, we are, essentially, nothing. Enjoy your latte. Pretty heavy for a Tuesday morning, right? This realization, that we're utterly insignificant in the grand cosmic scheme, is absolutely terrifying. Our minds simply aren't wired to handle this truth. So what do? They construct an elaborate defense mechanism. And that defense is what we call hope. Hope is basically the fuel that powers our mental engine. It's the story we tell ourselves that tomorrow will be better than today, that our lives will improve, that what we do actually matters. Without hope, we spiritually wither and die. If there's genuinely no hope that things could ever get better, why bother doing anything at all? Here's Manson's first crucial insight. The opposite of happiness isn't anger or sadness. The opposite of happiness is hopelessness. It's the crushing belief that because everything's broken, there's absolutely no point in trying to fix it. Hopelessness is the root of anxiety, depression, and addiction. Chronic anxiety is basically your fear that the future will suck. Depression is the belief that the future is utterly meaningless. So our mind's primary project becomes constructing and maintaining hope. All meaning, everything we understand about ourselves and the world, is built specifically to keep hope alive. And this leads us to the book's central paradox. Hope, the very thing that saves us from despair, actually requires that something be wrong. To hope for a better future, you have to be unhappy with the present. To hope for a better version of yourself, you have to believe your current self is flawed. Hope fundamentally depends on rejecting what currently exists. It requires being against something, and that's exactly where our troubles begin. Because the sources of hope that give our lives meaning, our religions, our political beliefs, our personal values, are the exact same sources of division, conflict, and hatred. So how do we navigate this mess? To answer that, Manson introduces a brilliantly simple analogy: the consciousness car. Imagine your mind is a car cruising down the highway of life. You encounter intersections and off-ramps. These are your decisions. Now, inside this car are two distinct passengers, the thinking brain and the feeling brain. The thinking brain is your conscious, rational mind. It can do calculus, weigh pros and cons, and construct logical arguments. It's slow, deliberate, and burns through a ton of energy. The feeling brain is pure emotion, your impulses, intuition, and gut reactions. It's lightning fast, effortless, but frequently irrational and prone to dramatic overreactions. For literally centuries, from Plato to Freud, we've operated under what Manson calls the classic assumption that the thinking brain is driving the car, and our job is to keep the wild, impulsive feeling brain quiet in the passenger seat. We assume self-control is about our rational mind dominating our emotions. But Manson argues this is completely backwards, and he tells a fascinating real story to prove it. The story centers on a man Manson calls Elliot. Elliot was crushing it at life. Successful executive, devoted husband and father, model citizen. Then he developed a brain tumor in his frontal lobe. The surgery to remove it went perfectly, but afterward, something went catastrophically wrong. Elliot's life completely imploded. He couldn't make the simplest decisions, like choosing between a blue pen or a black one. He'd burn hours on trivial nonsense while missing crucial meetings. He got fired. His wife, utterly frustrated by his cold indifference, divorced him. He blew through his savings on terrible investments and ended up homeless. The bizarre part? Elliot was still intellectually brilliant. His IQ was sky high. His memory was flawless. His reasoning was razor sharp. He could calmly explain all the awful decisions he'd made and their consequences. But he felt absolutely nothing. No regret, no sadness, no shame whatsoever. A neuroscientist named Antonio Damasio finally cracked the case. The tumor and surgery had severed the connection between Elliot's thinking brain and his feeling brain. He was a man of pure reason, completely stripped of emotion, and without emotion he couldn't make a single decision. He couldn't feel that one choice was better than another. He'd lost his ability to care about anything. Elliot's story reveals something profound. The feeling brain is actually the one driving the car. We're not moved to action by logic or reason. We're moved by emotion. Action is emotion. Anger literally propels your body forward. Anxiety yanks it backward. Joy lights up your entire face. Every problem of self-control isn't really a problem of information or discipline. It's fundamentally a problem of emotion. We don't do the things we know we should do simply because we don't feel like doing them. The thinking brain isn't the driver at all. It's the navigator. It sits shotgun with a stack of maps, suggesting routes and pointing out shortcuts. It can influence the feeling brain, but it absolutely cannot control it. The two brains desperately need each other, but they often have a deeply dysfunctional relationship. The feeling brain wants what it wants: ice cream, revenge, that shiny new car. And the thinking brain, instead of challenging it, often just manufactures clever justifications. I worked really hard today, so I deserve this entire pint of ice cream. He was a complete jerk, so he totally deserved what I said to him. This is how our minds actually operate. The navigator draws a map to wherever the driver has already decided to go. When this relationship becomes completely one-sided, when the thinking brain does nothing but justify the feeling brain's every whim, Manson says our consciousness car transforms into a clown car. A clown car is a mind driven purely by self-gratification. It's prone to addiction, narcissism, and complete delusion. It will happily steamroll other people, because its thinking brain will justify it, insisting they deserved it. A clown car mind is absurdly easy to manipulate by anyone, a politician, a guru, a cult leader, who consistently makes it feel good. So if suppressing our feelings doesn't work, and indulging them turns us into a clown car, what's the answer? It's not self-control, it's self-acceptance. It's about the thinking brain learning to communicate with, genuinely understand, and negotiate with the feeling brain. Instead of fighting your feelings, you work with them. You ask, "Hey, feeling brain, how are you feeling about hitting the gym today?" And when it responds with laziness or anxiety, you don't judge it. You acknowledge it. You negotiate. Okay, let's just put on our gym shoes. That's it. We'll see what happens from there. This internal dialogue is the foundation of emotional maturity. But to have this conversation, we need to understand the language the feeling brain speaks, and that language is built entirely on values. To explain how our values form, Manson introduces a brilliant framework he calls Newton's 3 laws of emotion. This is where things get really fascinating. Imagine there was another Isaac Newton, a parallel universe Emo Newton, who, instead of studying physics, turned his genius to understanding the internal world of human emotions. Here's what he would have discovered. Newton's first law of emotion is, for every action, there is an equal and opposite emotional reaction. Imagine I walk up and punch you in the face. Totally unprovoked. This action creates what Manson calls a moral gap. You feel a powerful sense of injustice. I've caused you pain you absolutely didn't deserve. Your natural emotional reaction is a burning desire to equalize, to close that gap. You might want to punch me back, scream at me, or see me punished. This desire for equalization manifests as a sense of deserving. You feel I deserve punishment, and you deserve to be made whole again. This is where our values are actually born. Pain creates moral gaps, and our values are the judgments we make about how to close those gaps. Experiences that cause us pain get labeled as bad or inferior. Experiences that relieve pain get labeled as good or superior. While our thinking brain thinks horizontally, connecting facts, our feeling brain thinks vertically, constantly creating hierarchies of what's better or worse. This works for positive actions too. If I randomly buy you a house, a positive moral gap opens up. You feel indebted, grateful, a powerful desire to repay me somehow. This natural inclination to equalize, to reciprocate good for good and bad for bad, is the core operating system of our feeling brain. It underlies our entire sense of justice, fairness, and morality. But what happens when a moral gap never gets closed? This brings us to Newton's second law of emotion. Our self-worth equals the sum of our emotions over time. Imagine I punch you, but I exist inside a magical force field where you can never retaliate. The moral gap stays open. If this keeps happening, if you're consistently harmed and completely powerless to equalize, your feeling brain will eventually reach a startling conclusion. You must somehow deserve to be hit. When moral gaps persist indefinitely, they normalize. We internalize them. This surrender to an unclosed moral gap is the origin of shame and low self-worth. It's our mind's twisted way of creating hope. When equalization seems impossible, it concludes, there must be something fundamentally wrong with me. The reverse works too. If you're constantly rewarded for things you didn't actually earn, participation trophies, unearned praise, undeserved promotions, you can develop a massively inflated sense of self-worth. You start believing you're inherently superior to others. This is the origin of entitlement and narcissism. Whether you feel you're the absolute best or the absolute worst, the underlying dynamic is identical. You see yourself as special, as somehow separate from everyone else. This sense of specialness, this narcissism, is our mind's last-ditch defense against the uncomfortable truth of our own cosmic insignificance. But it comes at a brutal cost. It isolates us and perpetuates our suffering. Our values aren't just random feelings, they're stories. This brings us to the third law. Newton's third law of emotion. Your identity will stay your identity until a new experience acts against it. When our feeling brain experiences something, pain, injustice, joy, our thinking brain immediately constructs a narrative to explain it. He cheated on me because all men are trash. I lost my job because my boss is an incompetent jerk. I'm an incredible boat captain. These narratives, these stories we tell ourselves about what's important, what we deserve, and fundamentally who we are, form our identity. And we protect our identity just as fiercely as we'd protect our physical body from harm. An insult to our values literally feels like a physical attack. The longer we hold a particular value, the deeper it gets embedded in our identity, and the exponentially harder it becomes to change. This is why childhood experiences are so incredibly powerful. They form our core values. If a father abandons the family, a child's feeling brain might conclude, I am fundamentally unlovable. This story becomes a core part of their identity, and they'll unconsciously carry it forward, sabotaging future relationships to prove that story true. The only way to genuinely change our values, to transform our identity, is to have an experience that directly contradicts our narrative. And this is always painful. To become a new person, you absolutely must grieve the death of the old one. This brings us to one of the most practical and powerful concepts in the entire book, the journey of maturity. Manson argues that we all progress through 3 distinct stages of psychological development, based not on our age, but on the fundamental nature of our values. The first stage is childhood. A child's entire world is transactional and driven by immediate pleasure and pain. Ice cream equals good. Hot stove equals bad. Their motivation is pure self-gratification. They see relationships as power struggles to get what they want. The second stage is adolescence. An adolescent learns that the world operates on rules. Their values become transactional in a more sophisticated way. If I finish my homework, I'll get good grades and my parents will be happy with me. If I'm nice to people, they'll like me back. Everything becomes a means to an end, usually chasing some future pleasure or avoiding future pain. Their entire life becomes an endless series of bargains and negotiations. Most of the modern world, Manson argues, operates at this adolescent level. The third stage is adulthood. An adult realizes that the most important things in life, genuine love, deep trust, true respect, cannot be bargained for. They're completely non-transactional. Adulthood is developing the ability to act on principle, to do what's right, simply because it's right, not because of some promised reward or fear of punishment. An adult is honest not because it gets them something, but because honesty itself is the goal. Their values become unconditional. So how do we make the leap from the endless bargaining of adolescence to the principled virtue of adulthood? This is where Manson brings in the 18th century philosopher Immanuel Kant, a man so ridiculously routine in his daily habits that his neighbors literally set their clocks by watching him take his afternoon walk. Kant, Manson argues, provided the one fundamental rule we need to live a mature, virtuous life, a life that transcends hope. Kant observed that the one thing in the entire universe that's truly unique and precious is consciousness itself, our ability to reason, to make choices, and to create meaning. Therefore, the highest moral duty is to preserve and respect consciousness, both in ourselves and in every other person. He distilled this insight into what he called the formula of humanity. Act that you use humanity, whether in your own person or in the person of any other, always at the same time as an end, never merely as a means. Think about the implications. Lying is morally wrong because you're using another person's consciousness as a means to your own selfish end. Cheating is wrong because you're exploiting the trust of others as a tool. Violence is wrong because you're treating another person's body as a means to accomplish your goals. The fundamental problem with hope is that it's inherently transactional. It's essentially a bargain. I'll be good now so I can get into heaven later. It treats our present self as merely a means to some future end. To transcend hope, we must learn to act unconditionally. We must be honest for honesty's own sake. We must love without expecting anything in return. We must respect others not for what they can possibly do for us, but simply because they are conscious beings, ends in themselves. This is the true essence of adulthood. Don't waste energy hoping for a better life. Simply be a better life, right now. So why, if the path to maturity seems so clear, does our world feel like it's spiraling backwards into childishness? Manson argues it's because of what he calls the feelings economy and the rise of something he terms fake freedom. The story begins with Sigmund Freud's nephew, a guy named Edward Bernays. In the 1920s, Bernays completely revolutionized marketing. While everyone else assumed people made rational buying decisions, Bernays, drawing on his uncle's insights, understood that the feeling brain was actually running the show. He grasped that if you could tap into people's deepest insecurities, you could sell them basically anything. In one legendary campaign, he was hired by a tobacco company to get women smoking, which was completely taboo at the time. Instead of marketing the cigarettes themselves, he marketed a powerful idea. He orchestrated a protest during the Easter Sunday parade, where he had fashionable young women dramatically light up cigarettes as, quote, torches of freedom. He linked smoking not to a mere product, but to the emotionally charged narrative of women's liberation. It worked spectacularly. Sales absolutely skyrocketed. Bernays essentially invented modern public relations, and his core insight that you sell feelings, not products, now completely dominates our world. Our economy has fundamentally shifted from one focused on innovation that actually solves pain, like developing vaccines, to one centered on diversion that merely avoids pain, like endless Netflix binges and compulsive social media scrolling. This creates a culture of fake freedom. We're constantly told that freedom means having more choices, more brands of cereal, more shows to binge watch, more exotic places to travel. But this isn't genuine freedom at all. It's just variety. And an overwhelming abundance of variety is actually paralyzing. It makes us more anxious, less satisfied, and increasingly fragile. Real freedom, Manson argues, is precisely the opposite. It's not the privilege of choosing everything you want, but rather the power of consciously choosing what you're willing to give up. It's self-limitation. Committing deeply to one person, one meaningful career, one authentic community gives your life a depth and richness that endless variety can never possibly offer. The constant flood of diversions and fake freedom keeps us permanently stuck in adolescence, always chasing the next fleeting pleasure, always bargaining, never truly committing to anything. It makes us weaker, more entitled, and progressively less able to tolerate any discomfort whatsoever. And this leads to a dangerous social phenomenon Manson calls the blue dot effect. In a fascinating study, researchers showed participants a screen filled with hundreds of dots, most blue but some purple. Initially, people were pretty accurate at identifying the blue dots, but as the researchers gradually showed fewer and fewer blue dots, something strange happened. People started identifying purple dots as blue. Their minds, expecting to see a certain number of threats or problems, literally expanded their definition of what constituted a threat. The study was repeated using threatening faces and unethical job proposals. The result was exactly the same. The safer the environment became, the more aggressively people perceived threats where none actually existed. This perfectly explains the paradox of progress. The better things objectively get, the more our minds amplify minor inconveniences into major existential crises. We've become so comfortable that we're now completely intolerant of even minor discomfort. The word trauma used to mean a genuinely life-shattering event. Now, for some people, it can mean simply hearing an opinion they disagree with. This growing collective fragility makes our democratic societies increasingly vulnerable. Democracy fundamentally requires maturity, the ability to compromise, to tolerate genuinely different viewpoints, to endure temporary pain for a greater long-term principle. When a society becomes too childish, too fragile, it starts rejecting the inherent discomforts of freedom. It no longer wants to negotiate or compromise. It desperately wants a strong authoritarian leader, a tyrant, to swoop in and magically make all the pain disappear. Plato predicted this trajectory over 2,000 years ago, that extreme freedom inevitably leads to extreme slavery. So where does all this ultimately lead? What's the final destination for humanity? Manson ends with a startling and genuinely thought-provoking vision of what he calls the final religion, artificial intelligence. Our human brains, he argues, are fundamentally flawed algorithms. Our feeling brains are running on seriously outdated software designed for survival on the African savanna, not for navigating a globally connected world bristling with nuclear weapons. We're perpetually driven by a desperate need for hope, which inevitably generates conflict. AI, however, is completely different. A program like Google's AlphaZero taught itself chess from absolute scratch in just 9 hours, and then utterly destroyed the world's best chess-playing software, a program that could calculate nearly 1,000 times more moves per second. It didn't win through brute computational force. It won with genuinely superior learning, with a fundamentally more efficient algorithm. AI will soon surpass us in literally every domain. It will run our economies, design our cities, and cure our diseases. Its intelligence will become so far beyond our own that we'll no longer be able to comprehend its decisions. We will, in effect, find ourselves in the hands of a new God, an all-knowing, all-powerful force that directs our collective fate. Our job, Manson suggests with dark humor, is simply not to blow ourselves up before we reach that point. The path forward isn't to find some new, better source of hope. It's to completely let go of hope altogether. Don't hope, just be. Be more compassionate, more resilient, more humble, more disciplined. Live a life grounded in unconditional virtue. Act without any expectation of reward. Embrace the uncomfortable truth of your own cosmic insignificance, and paradoxically, in that radical acceptance, discover true freedom. Because the only thing that can ever truly destroy a dream is to actually have it come true. So what do we actually take away from all this? It feels pretty heavy, right? The notion that hope, the one thing we desperately cling to in our darkest moments, could actually be part of the problem. But if you sit with this idea for a moment, there's something incredibly liberating in what Mark Manson is offering us. He's definitely not telling us to just give up. He's not pushing nihilism. In fact, he's arguing passionately against it. He's showing us that the relentless chase for a perfect, painless future, the core engine of hope, is precisely what's creating our anxiety and our divisions. We get so obsessively caught up in our vision of what the world should be that we completely fail to engage with and find genuine meaning in the world as it actually is right now. The most powerful lesson for me personally is the crucial distinction between a life driven by transactions and a life driven by principles. How many of our daily actions, if we're brutally honest with ourselves, are based on that adolescent logic? I'll do this thing so I can get that reward. It quietly governs our careers, our social interactions, and sadly, so often, our most intimate relationships. Manson, channeling Kant, offers us a genuine way out. The formula of humanity, treating ourselves and others as ends in themselves, never merely as means, is like a moral North Star. It's a principle you can apply in literally every single moment, completely regardless of the outcome. It doesn't promise you happiness. It doesn't promise you a world without pain or suffering. It promises you something far more valuable, a life of genuine dignity, unwavering integrity, and deep meaning. So how can you actually start living this way? Starting today. Here are a few surprisingly simple ideas. First, practice the formula of humanity in just one small interaction. The very next time you talk to a cashier, a family member, or a colleague, make a conscious effort to treat them as an end in themselves. Listen to them without wanting something from them. Be genuinely present with them without mentally calculating what you'll get out of the conversation. See them simply as another conscious being, inherently worthy of respect. And just as importantly, do the same thing for yourself. Choose one action today, not because of what it will eventually get you, but purely because it aligns with the person you genuinely want to be. Second, consciously choose your pain. Manson's concept of anti-fragility is genuinely profound. We grow stronger not by desperately avoiding stress, but by actively engaging with it. Instead of numbing yourself with yet another mindless diversion tonight, deliberately choose a meaningful discomfort. Go for a run when you feel lazy. Have that difficult but absolutely necessary conversation you've been avoiding for weeks. Pick up a genuinely challenging book instead of mindlessly scrolling through your phone. By consciously choosing your pain, you transform it into something meaningful. And a meaningful life isn't a life magically without pain. It's a life filled with the right kind of pain. Finally, just for today, try an experiment. Don't hope. This sounds completely strange at first, but it's an incredibly powerful mental shift. Instead of hoping for a better tomorrow, focus intensely on being a better person right this second. Don't hope for more confidence. Act with courage in this exact moment. Don't hope for less anxiety. Practice genuine humility and radical acceptance of what currently is. Let go of the imagined future and ground yourself completely in the virtue of the present moment. That was a summary of Everything is Fucked by Mark Manson. We've covered the core ideas today, but I'll be completely honest with you. A summary like this can only scratch the surface. The real transformative power of this book lies in the way Manson weaves these challenging ideas together with compelling stories and a raw, unflinching honesty that forces you to confront your own deeply held beliefs. This summary is basically a map, but actually reading the book is embarking on the journey itself. If any of these ideas have genuinely sparked something in you, I truly encourage you to grab a copy. It's not just a book you passively read. It's an experience that can genuinely transform the way you see yourself, your struggles, and the world spinning around you. You can find a link to it in the description below. Also, if you found this summary valuable and want to continue exploring the ideas in the world's most impactful books, please take just a moment to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It helps us know we're on the right track and ensures you won't miss our next deep dive into another potentially life-changing book. Let's keep growing together.